Hi, everyone. Welcome officially and good afternoon, maybe good morning, or maybe good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading of new thrillers from the press. Today, we're going to be hearing from Todd Medema, author of How to Surf a Hurricane, released on August 2nd. Stephen Fisher, author of Killer Personality, released on September 16th, and Sally Francis, author of Carroll Gardens Story, released on September 30th. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, you can find the books on Atmosphere Press's website too. That's at atmospherepress.com/book. And I'll also actually put direct links to each book in the chat so you can easily check them out that way. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for your questions. So during the readings, if you've got a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I will make sure they get asked. And one last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to support Todd, Stephen, and Sally today. We're going to start off with our first reader, who is Todd Medema. Todd studied technology, entrepreneurship, and design at Carnegie Mellon. After working on self-driving cars and board games, he discovered a passion for clean energy. He spent 4 years working on the Tesla Megapack battery and now offers product management consulting to clean energy companies. He wrote How to Surf a Hurricane because he believes the future doesn't have to be a dystopia, and he got tired of only reading stories of doom and gloom. I'll have to say, I am very much in agreement with that. In How to Surf a Hurricane, one man's fight for the future ignites a hurricane of change. When Mauro Petrov's groundbreaking battery project is abruptly canceled by his powerful uncle, he refuses to let his dream die. Teaming up with a hurricane surfer, an Alaskan oil worker, and a French salt farmer, Morrow hatches a daring plan to steal back its prototype during a raging storm at sea. Let's now welcome Todd.
Hello. And this is the book we will be reading from today. Like you were saying, it is a story of hope and adaptation to climate change hidden inside of a thriller on the high seas. Without further ado, Chapter 1, Morrow, the Family Business. Morrow, for the last time, your project is cancelled. Dimitri's bald, stocky form loomed over Morrow. But, Uncle, Morrow shrank back his slender body deeper into the chair. This can't be happening. Not now. I'm so close. He grabbed the underside of his ornate wood chair, drawing energy from the pain of the sharp edge. Diedenka, uncle, my battery project is critical to our survival. The survival of our company? No. We still make money, but our costs. He looked out the window as if searching for answers amongst the trees of downtown Pittsburgh, rich in their fall colors. The price of natural gas, Morrow started. Dimitri twisted around, his pale face turning red. Do not tell me about the price of natural gas. We make electricity from it. Of course we must pay for it. He began pacing. No, I'm referring to our other costs. Your costs. Morrow stood, feeling his blood rising. How rich of him to lecture me about costs in this extravagant conference room. Did he really have to floor it with imported marble? I've told you, the future is in energy storage. No, Morrow. There will be no future if we go bankrupt. We don't have the money to continue your little experiments any longer. You told me you'd have the prototype ready by 2038. Well, it's been a year. Where are my batteries? Morrow looked at the floor, gnawing his lip. Dimitri scoffed. I'm cutting your funding. Your project is over. I'm announcing it today, but I wanted to tell you first. Have you even looked at the spreadsheets I sent you? He clenched his fists. The revenue opportunity, the emissions reductions? He can't do this to me, not to my project. Dimitri shook his head. Morrow, you always have your head in the clouds. Such lofty ideas about the environment, the future. He gestured widely and brought his finger down hard against the white wood. Never in the now. We have a company to run. If we go under, thousands will lose their jobs. Uncle, Moro pleaded. Dmitri raised his fist, the tip of a scar on his wrist poking out of his cuff. No, do not dirty yourself begging. I've made up my mind. We are done. He marched out of the room. He's really gonna do it. I can't believe it. How deep does that scar of his go? Maro Petrov wandered the white hallways of Petrov Power's headquarters in a daze. I thought he was making empty threats, pushing me to deliver faster. He stopped in front of Dimitri's portrait in the hallway, next to the portraits of the two previous CEOs. Maximilian and Gregory had sacrificed everything to immigrate, build the company, and provide for their family. And now this. Without thinking, he found himself back at his desk. Sighing, he dropped into his chair. His workspace automatically appeared, projected onto his thick-rimmed glasses. Looking up from the virtual mess on his desk, the blueprints for his project floated in front of him, teasing him. Their next generation lithium-sulfur battery. It was only through sheer force of will and stubbornness bordering on obsession that Morrow had gotten this far. He'd secured a patent from Carnegie Mellon researchers who'd solved the shuttle effect, invoked and promised numerous favors to build a prototype. He even started spending his inheritance to keep the project afloat, hoping, believing that Dmitri would understand once he saw their performance in person. But it wasn't enough. Before the prototype even arrived, Dmitri was shutting it down. Morrow played with the iron ring on his right pinky finger, whispering the oath he'd taken when been given the ring at graduation. To the best of my knowledge and power, I will not suffer bad workmanship or faulty material in my works before mankind as an engineer or in my dealings with my own soul. Reciting the calling of the engineer usually helped him calm down, but not this time. I've been working here since I was 12. I studied engineering because I dreamt of our family building a future with incredible batteries. Imagine everything from planes to trains, ships to smelters, silent, clean, electric. That could have been us. And this is how he repays me. He hammered his desk. The gesture brought up his news application. The top headline, another fracking leak poisons local water. He wanted to scream. Instead, we got this. He's so stuck in fear that he's not just letting us down, he's letting the world down. He swiped away the virtual window and stared at a real one. Jobs be damned. These are the future. But I can't pay for them alone. If Dmitri stops funding it, what else can I do? I should have made a backup plan when he started to threaten me. I was too naive. Sadness tightened his throat. His debts. Damn it, Morrow. Now it's not the time to cry. What if I left Petrov Power? Went to another company? No. He clenched his jaw, grinding his teeth. This is my project. I've put too much into it. I'm not giving up now. He saw a group of coworkers leaving for lunch, and his stomach growled. No point in thinking on an empty stomach. He overheard snippets of the conversation as he caught up. Did you see the Pirates game last night? Yeah, gotta put my full stadium VR season pass to use. What a play. He rolled his eyes. I don't know what else to do. I'm playing by the rules, but the rules are rigged against me. It was totally illegal. I can't believe the umpire didn't call it. Right? I replayed it from 3 angles. It was close, but it worked. They won. Yeah, all because Johnson stole third base. Man, mad respect for Johnston. He's got more steals than anyone. Hmm. Morrow joined in. Why'd he do it? Isn't stealing a base super risky? Huh, it's all down to the timing. If they get caught, they take it out. But if they're fast enough, they were down in the ninth inning. This was really their last hope, and the gamble paid off. Huh, interesting. Thank you. Morrow nodded and backed away, allowing them to continue. I'm down anyway. Maybe that's what I need, a big gamble. Wait, did I just learn something from sports? That night, Morrow tossed and turned, a plan forming in his mind. The Berlin factory had almost finished the second prototype. After that, they'd ship it across the Atlantic to their warehouse near Pittsburgh. Without Dimitri's funding, it would remain in storage, forever unused. Unless If he somehow intercepted them in transit, he could bypass the company entirely, sell them to the highest bidder, and let the world see just how much those batteries are capable of. He could even file an insurance claim against the stolen goods and use that to fund the project further. He'd never stolen anything before, much less a shipping container full of batteries. But how hard could it be? At the end of the day, everything's an engineering problem, right? To pull this off, he would need a team. Clearly, he couldn't trust anyone in his company. But who?
Thank you so much, Todd, and thank you for that reading, especially leaving us kind of on a cliffhanger there. We got to find out what happens next. So thank you for that. Reading next today is Stephen Fisher. Steve has a BA in Honors English from Penn State University, a law degree from the University of Chicago, and most recently, an MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts. He's the CEO of a global electronics company, but has always had a passion for writing. He's married to his wife of 36 years, and they have 3 children and 2 brilliant dogs. He resides in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and has a lifelong love of all things Italian. Today, we're going to be hearing Steve read from Killer Personality, in which a young man named Kevin meets lovely Olivia in a bar, a random event, or so he thinks. They fall in love, but she turns out to be someone different than he thought, someone lethal. He goes on the road seeking to find out her true identity. We'll hear more now from Steve himself.
Thank you. Um, this is a Killer Personality, and it started life as a short story. And when I finished the story, I was so enamored of the characters that I was curious myself as to what would happen if if I continued the story. And in a very brief period of time, I outlined 20 some odd chapters and went on to write the book. And at this point, this is the first in a series. And the second one, Killer Urge, will be published by Atmosphere Press in January, and more to follow. So here we go. Chapter 1, Killer Personality. She loves me not. Kevin Mathers. One night in the living room grill, my life changed forever. Everything that happened afterward was another life, another identity for me. That night, I was not expecting anything, not looking for anything, just waiting for my burger and chatting with Dimitri. The usual buzz of voices and laughter created a happy soundtrack typical of the living room grill. I turned on my bar stool and I saw her across the room. I couldn't help but notice her appearance. Even from a distance, I could see her cashmere blonde hair and elegant posture. Her face was open and she was noticeably pretty with high cheekbones and little makeup. There was something about the way she was standing, sipping a glass of wine and looking at me, a kind of confidence and frank interest that got my attention. As I said, I was sitting at the bar talking to my pal Dimitri and waiting for my burger to show up. Not just any burger, but the best burger in Philly. Dimitri is first-generation Greek, and his parents had owned their own restaurant for decades. He'd grown up working there. He had gone to Wharton for finance and then made a boatload of money as a bond trader in New York City. He had hated the work, however, and had come home to Philly to open a pub in the Fittler Square neighborhood where I lived. Dimitri had taken over an old bar and lovingly restored it. Red brick floors with oriental runners, wood walls, and restored tin ceilings, the smell of polish and oil. The walls gleamed, the brass bar footrest glowed with the care Dimitri lavished on it every night after closing time. On the wall were prints of all the U.S. presidents up until Kennedy who had a place of honor. There were giant movie posters from the 1920s and 1930s that I imagined had real value. Dimitri said he liked to see them every day, and because he spent most of his life in the bar, why not have art he loves? I occasionally took clients to dinner at the living room grill. They typically enjoyed the ambiance and the feeling of being shown a special, little-known place. I had a small business selling information and doing background checks on potential employees for high-level jobs. It was a good business for me, and I enjoyed helping my clients. I was 30 years old, reasonably happy with my life, and just hanging around and waiting for the next turn of the wheel. And there it was. The next turn of the wheel revealed her. She saw me looking at her, then she smiled. Her smile was so radiant and genuine that for a moment my heart stopped. The world stopped turning, and there was only the look between us, like an electric connection. I felt almost giddy, unreasonably happy. I smiled back, and the connection stayed for a long moment. She started to walk toward me, moving around people and tables, her eyes never leaving mine. Even from this distance, I could see that she moved like an athlete or a dancer. Her grace was hypnotizing. She was tall, maybe 5'8", with great posture. I was transfixed. This had never happened to me before. As she came up to me, I exhaled. "Hello," she said. Her voice was deeper than I expected. It struck me as warm, melodic, and friendly. I was smitten. Olivia Sims. The living room grill near my home was one of my favorite hangouts. It got a local crowd, but was large and crowded enough that I could fit in if I dressed down. I stood at the edge of the crowd and watched. Unless men can see your face or your body, a woman in a bar is usually invisible. It was time. I was ready for a new relationship. I was old-fashioned in certain ways. I liked to look men in the eye and see how I felt. I wanted to look a person in the eye and see if I felt that spark, that good kind of tension, and yes, attraction. I also wanted to feel that things would last. So the person had to be serious and have that element of permanent attraction. These were things that I could only sense face to face. I'd had some success meeting men in this bar, but never had a relationship lasted. That was the story of my life, I suppose. Each time I got my heart broken, I recovered and began to dream of the man who would come to stay and never want to leave. The idea of a permanent relationship made my heart beat faster. It was all I really wanted. I had seen this man several times before at the grill, and I knew he was a regular by the way he greeted the bartender and some of the other patrons. He was a social person, a friendly man whom others seemed to like. I was a loner, and I liked this quality in men. In this man, I liked his looks. He was tall enough, probably a shade under 6 feet. His hair was curly and casual. I hated when men had perfect hair. For me, men who looked too perfect were in love with themselves, and there was no place for me in their affections. He was dressed neatly but casually, and his body seemed taut and fit from what I could observe. He moved well, and my instincts said that he was a sensuous person, an important factor for a forever relationship. In short, I felt something from this man, potential. I liked the way he sat by himself, seemingly self-contained. It takes confidence to be alone. I knew because I had always been alone, even when I was with someone. I admired this man because I knew he did not need to be alone. I saw that I had several good shots from my hidden camera, and I left. Back home, I booted up my computer and I ran the photos through facial recognition sites that I had access to through my job and black market technology investments. It is truly amazing how much information is available on each of us, even without the dark web. In 30 minutes, I knew everything about Kevin that I needed to know. He was 30 years old, a successful businessman, the only child of deceased parents, and best of all, he had never been married. His tax return showed generous charitable contributions to animal shelters, along with support for abused children in various hospitals. He seemed to be a genuinely nice guy, a match and a catch. Admittedly, Kevin was not exciting, not dangerous, not an edgy guy, but I wanted reliability. I needed kind and loving, and above all, enduring. He could even be boring if he loved me, stayed with me. I began to think about what I would wear on Wednesday night. The first time we met, it was a simple matter of catching his eye and smiling at him. I was a striking woman and had really dressed for the occasion. I knew the effect I could have on men if I chose to turn my lights on. By nature, I was a direct person, so I chose to come to him. Kevin. Up close, her dark eyes and her hair were illuminated by her incredible smile. For a moment, when I looked into her eyes, I had the sense of looking over a parapet into a chasm deeper than the eye can plumb. There's no way I was interesting enough for this woman. She was truly beautiful, striking. How would she even notice me? I was attractive, but this woman was in another league. Sorry, I didn't mean to stare. My name is Kevin, I said, and put out my hand. Olivia, she said quietly, taking my hand in both of hers, all the while maintaining eye contact as if we were magnetized. Oh boy, I was gone. It's so nice to meet you, she said. I loved her voice, warm, low, throaty. I had the overwhelming impression that she was a kind person. She seemed so sympathetic and genuine. Kevin, may I buy you a drink? I pretended to think about it. Could I just have the money instead? She laughed, and I was over the edge, a spontaneous laugh. My God, was there ever anything more attractive, especially when she was laughing at my jokes? Handsome and funny, she said. The next few hours melted away as we talked. I learned all about Olivia and how she had escaped from a small town in the South and found a job in an insurance company downtown. The conversation was easy and time passed. We were discussing our interests, and Olivia was telling me about her love for animals and that she volunteered at an animal shelter every other weekend. In my book, caring about animals was an important value. I couldn't help but think she was a special person, not just beautiful, but kind and deep. As if from a spell, we awakened to discover that we were the last people in the bar, and it was closing time. Dmitri was smiling at us. He cocked his head and turned his palms up. Time to go home, people. We have lives too. I turned to Olivia. I felt an urgency. I have to see you again, I said, leaning in close. Suddenly, I was a child back in the home where I had grown up. Mom was all dressed up to go out in high heels that clicked on the wooden floor. I was in bed in that dreamy state before you fall asleep when she sat down beside me. I smelled the perfume she wore only when she and Dad were going out for the night. Olivia was wearing the same scent. Is that Shalimar? I asked Olivia. She smiled. What a guy. You notice everything. She gazed up at me with those unblinking dark blue eyes and a smile I felt down in my toes. She stood up straight, put her hands on my cheeks, and pulled me into her. It was a full body kiss, and the last thing I saw before I closed my eyes were her full lips and white teeth. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think there's so much great visuals happening. There's so much to be able to picture. So thank you for that reading and for giving us that visual to hopefully be excited to read the rest of the book with.
Hope so.
Our final reader for today is Sally Francis. Sally, a retired clinical social worker, treated patients with post-trauma disorders for over 30 years in her private practice. Her study of trauma and interest in how people regenerate adult development after being frozen by PTSD inspired the writing of this novel. She studied fiction writing at the Sackett Writers Group and the Sarah Lawrence College Writing Institute. Her short fiction has been published by persimmontree.org and in the anthology Flash Reads. Sally is a longtime resident of Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, where she lives with her family. And today we'll be hearing her read from the story Carroll Gardens Story of Halloween, in which Halloween in 1998 Brooklyn takes a dark turn, which is, of course, very relevant to the timeline of the real world today. When the body of a neighbor is found posed as a holiday witch, suspicion falls on Helper, a gentle local handyman. As his detective nephew digs into the mystery, buried secrets and old traumas resurface, challenging the community's sense of justice, loyalty, and truth. Sally, go ahead and unmute and take it away.
Okay. Hi. The story begins on October 30th, like today, but in 1998. And I don't know what to say about this book. I've been working on it for like 10 years and I can't believe it's out, and it's certainly based on my interest in trauma and what happens to people in their adult life when they've been traumatized earlier on. But it was also inspired by a bunch of other things. And I love my neighborhood. So it's about my neighborhood also. And here it is. And okay, I'm going to begin reading. Oh, and also I found out that Kirkus Reviews did a very positive review of the book. And then I just found out yesterday that they're going to be featuring my book in a I think a paper publication, right? They come out as a magazine, and in December 15th. So wow. And here's the beginning of the first chapter. October 30th, 1998. Chapter 1, Helper. He touches his initials in the sweater vest his mother made him 36 years ago when he was 14. FB was knit in white just above his 14-year-old heart. Fortunato Bonaventura, that's him. He wears the vest every day except when he washes it. It reminds him who he is. There, Mama had said with a smile as she smoothed the front of the just finished sweater on Helper. She had made horizontal red and dark blue stripes because that's what he wanted, and she was showing him in her full-length mirror. His thick brown hair was itchy and messy, sticking up all over, and he saw the sparse beginnings of a first mustache. Gino always said he was fat, which meant wrong, which made him want to curl up under the stoop and hide, become brown to match the color of the building. But the sweater vest was beautiful, brand new, bold colors, made by her just for him. She'd let him pick the colors. It was just 3 strong notes, the triad of C, E, G. Look, darling, see the FB? That stands for you. Fortunato Bonaventura, she'd said, looking in the mirror with him and pointing. Then she'd taken him by the chin and made him face her. I know everyone calls you Helper nowadays because you help everyone all the time. But this sweater I made for you, this is to remind you of your true self. Fortunato, the lucky one, the special one. Only a special genius could have figured out how to recover from that coma. Somehow you figured it out in some part of your brain. We don't know how. You can figure things out. Maybe nobody else will know it about you, but I know. And now you will know. See, Fortu, she'd said, turning him back to the mirror. Feel the letters with your fingers, Fortu. And he did it then. And he does it now on this fall day in October 1998. And he does it often just to remind himself. Now he is 50, a small man, barely 5'2", so he can still wear the vest, even though it has pilled and stretched over his round panza. Relatives have said it is too small because the white t-shirt under it shows between his pants and the vest. He doesn't use the mirror very much because Gino said he looked like TV's Lou Costello, who was always foolish. That gave him a low sinking sensation, brownish gray and wispy, like a broken pigeon wing, a low sour B flat. Mary Pat, whom he has always avoided, asks for a favor when she sees him next to the Progresso soups at Met Food. They never spoke before. She is a slightly stooped older lady and wears her short steel-colored hair curled under with long bangs. He remembers when she used to have curly dyed red hair like Lucille Ball. She is a longtime neighbor, regarded with suspicion by many in Carroll Gardens. She is Irish in this old Italian neighborhood, but it is not just that. Mary Pat has a reputation for being mean and stingy while smiling and laughing. Sometimes she is unsteady on her feet and smells of wine, and she's known for fooling people. Whenever they mention her name, people shake their heads and purse their lips. They say, well, That's Mary Pat. What do you expect? No one can understand why she still lives there up on the third floor of the brick row house after her only sister moved away years ago now. Mary Pat is like June Allison in a 1940s movie, chipper and too cheerful, but all the while scheming like Betty Davis. One time, she made a play for one of Helper's cousins a long time ago. He wanted nothing to do with her, despite the tins of homemade cookies she routinely brought over to his firehouse. He finally turned her down, and the next morning, when the firemen woke up, they found dog poo smeared all over their front door. No one knew for sure, but everyone assumed it was Mary Pat. That's just how she is. Helper, my closet shelf fell down. She frowns. Can you fix that for me? She whines and pouts, head tilted like a little girl trying to charm someone. It's too complicated. He doesn't know how to respond. So she waits. When there is too much silence, she looks impatient. And so too quickly, he says, okay, befuddled by the unfamiliar contact. When he leaves her, he has mustard yellow doubting feelings. Later, when he goes over, besides the fallen down shelf, she shows him a lock that needs changing and a warped shelf in the bathroom. And there's some broken tile too. He says, okay, but when he leaves, expecting to return later with tools, he reflects on all this. It's all wrong. It's not a favor. It's a job. For a job, you're supposed to get paid, Papa always said. A favor is one thing. You do it to be friendly because you want to be a good neighbor, because you are a helper, Papa said, but then turned his stubbly face to him. A job is another thing. A job you do to get paid. You might not even like them, but you want the money. They need it done, but it's not easy work. And then it's a job and you get paid. Don't mix them up, he'd said, pointing his thick finger at Helper. Papa was sometimes a fast-moving storm cloud. After visiting Mary Pat's apartment, Helper sits on the curb around the corner on his own tree-lined street, shady in the late autumn afternoon. Some red, brown, green leaves hanging onto the maples. The ginkgos are still all yellow with bare black branches. The falling leaves drift past my window, the autumn leaves of red and gold. D, E, F, B flat, Mama playing the piano, singing in her quavery soprano like translucent rice paper. He idly looks up and sees Halloween decorations on the brownstone opposite, fake spider webs around the banisters, and a life-size Dracula in shiny black and red satin up at the door. Its bony hands hold a bowl that's empty now, but tomorrow afternoon will be filled with tiny candies. Mary Pat is a neighbor, but she is not nice. Helper has seen her at the bakery, pretending to tip the girls when he is lined to get coffee and a pastry. She puts her hand in her wallet and then over the tip jar, but there's no money in her hand. All the while, she's chatting with the bakery girls and smiling like a ventriloquist dummy. He has heard her call the old Arabic man who runs the corner store Joseph, even though everyone else calls him Mr. Olam. That doesn't seem right. Once at Met Food, he saw her drop a jar of pickles that cracked. She glanced around to see if anyone saw and then put it back, pickle juice dripping onto the shelf under all the other pickle jars and down onto the floor. Papa had said she's kamuria, a pain in the neck, and Mama said she's tishi-toshi, thinks she's a big shot. Helper knows he has to tell her that it's a job she wants, not a favor, and she needs to pay him. Mama says in his head, "Speak up, Helper." She says that because he is quiet too much. Later, when he goes over to Mary Pat's, he expects something bad, like the dread when he had to tell on Gino. Mary Pat buzzes him in, and he trudges up the narrow stairway to the third-floor apartment with cinder block feet. Partway up, his sweater vest gets caught on a sharp piece of metal railing. He tugs back, and it pulls, and the threads tear apart. The blue stripe is torn now, and the ends of the yarn are sticking up on the right front. Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! He sits on the step, heavy with remorse about the damage, and dialogues with scowling Mama inside his head. Your fault. You should never have said yes. You should never have even talked to that Strega. You saw how we never talked to her. And his father's face is angry too. He is tearful when Mary Pat opens her apartment door. She says in sugary Doris Day tones, "Helper, what's wrong? Come on up." He turns and slowly finishes the climb with her watching. She is wearing a mask of thin concern on her face. When they get into her apartment, she scrutinizes him and says, like it doesn't matter, "Oh, you tore your old sweater. Don't worry about that. I'll just cut off the ends." She quickly digs a big silver scissors out of the kitchen drawer and walks back toward him. The shiny scissors look huge and catch the afternoon light coming in from the front balcony. For a moment, the reflection is blinding. Big silver scissors, Gino holding them, cousin Rocco holding the panicked mouse by its tail. Gino says, "Look, Fortu, look what I do to him. If you don't do what I say, then I do this to you." And snip, the mouse's head comes off and blood comes out and Fortu throws up. Another time, Mama in the kitchen says, hands on hips, "Who took that money from my drawer? I'm saving for Rosa's baby. I had $10. You know, Fortu?" He almost says it was Gino, but Gino, quietly, behind Mama, has the scissors behind his back and brings them in front, and Helper sees, but Mama can't see. And Gino opens and closes the scissors, and Helper says, "No, Mama, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know." Then Helper knows he lied to Mama, and he can't tell the priest. He still hasn't had communion, so now he's a bad boy, and bad boys go to hell where there's fire. And now the shiny scissors are blinding, and the sharp ends are pointing at his chest. And Mary Pat says, "Here, let me," and reaches for him. And he yells, "No," and pushes her back hard. And she loses her balance and falls backward in the living room against the raised slate shelf under the fireplace. She falls straight back, and her head hits smack against the shelf and then onto the floor. And there's blood flooding out. And he watches and can't move. It's like a horror movie. When the fear fills his legs, seconds later, he runs away. He runs away. He runs out of the apartment, leaving the door open. He runs down the flight of stairs, out onto the outdoor landing, down the tall steps, across the street, down Strong Place to his brownstone where he's always lived. Stooping under the brownstone stairs, he hurries to the room no one goes to now but him. In Mama's brown corduroy rocker, he curls up and rocks and imagines talking to his mother and listens to the sounds outside the house. The sing-song of little girls chalking a Patsy grid on the sidewalk and then playing the game. An ambulance calls out a few blocks away. B, F sharp, B, F sharp, ba, 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 ba. He touches the broken strands of yarn in the front of his sweater and cringes and leaks tears. Later, it's gotten dark. The window into the garden level tells him it's turned nighttime. He should be hungry, but he has seasick nausea, like the world is tipping back and forth. What do? I should go back. But do what? Papa, in his mind, says, don't leave a mess. Whether you're just helping or doing a job, don't ever leave a mess. Nobody likes that. You see how we clean up, your uncles and me, when we build something? We leave it spotless, spotless. Helper sees his father and uncles carrying discarded pieces of drywall and collecting hardware into little boxes, sweeping and mopping after a day of making a new room for someone. What about the lady? He asked Papa. Ah, that part is over, says Papa. That's all done. Now it's the mess you pay attention to. You don't tell anybody. That's private business. That's family business. Nobody ever talks about the dead bodies. Just clean the mess. What about the lady? He asked Mama. That's God who did that part. God takes the soul. Now, just listen to Papa. The end for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was such a really what is the word I'm looking for? I think evocative. Just I felt a lot of emotions at that delivery, Sally. So thank you so much for giving us that reading today.
My pleasure.
So great, thank you. And at this point, we do have some time for our audience Q&A. So if anyone has a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those questions in the chat and I will make sure they get asked. We do have a question for all three authors to start us off. And this question more of a statement. It says, tell us more about the inspiration that set this book in motion for you. I know we heard a little bit about that from some of the bios. It'll be great to hear some more details. I'm thinking we can go in reading order. So Todd, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, so the question was, what inspired the writing of the book?
Yes.
Yeah, so a central premise of How to Surf a Hurricane is that climate change is happening. We're already past 1.5 C and probably going to go further than that. And so the narrative somewhat shifts around how do we adapt while also still doing what we can to, to mitigate further damage. And so I asked this question, how can we find joy in that adaptation? If we know there's going to be more storms, more extreme weather, what's something that we as humans can find that like would be exciting? Like what if there was an extreme sport that revolved around hurricanes? What if we figured out how to surf hurricanes?
Right. I love this kind of premise because I think this is such a beautiful thing about writers. Is how do you even think of these things? So I think that's really a great inspiration to start us off. Steve, what about you? What was the inspiration that set this book in motion for you?
Well, first of all, it was during COVID, and I think I was looking for someone to kill. No, I think that no, the truth is that when I went back to school to get my master's, I was very interested in what makes a thriller, and I was particularly I wrote my senior thesis on villains, and so I wanted to create a three-dimensional villain who was sympathetic, even as they did bad things. I wanted to make their badness logical, and I just was thinking about doing that, and along the way, I wanted a story that would be compelling, a page turner, but that was also three-dimensional. So it was trying to develop a villain who was at once attractive and also lethal, and would do things that I would never do, but that we all wish we could do. We're sort of rooting for villains, even though we don't really want to bring Hannibal Lecter home to meet mom. So there is that dark side of us. So that's how I began, and then of course after I created the people, and I'm sure this happens for my fellow writers, they did what they do. It was almost like once I gave them the life, that they told me how they wanted to behave. And I know that sounds sort of strange, but they determined the plot. So that's how it came to be.
Yeah, I love how this kind of theoretical question really kind of branched out and became more and more and more as you were working on it. And I think a lot of authors kind of get surprised by that process. So it's interesting to hear how it played out for you. And Sally, what about you? What was the inspiration that set this book in motion for you?
Okay, well, there's a few things. I mean, I already mentioned my interest in trauma and how it works in our lives. But in addition, the helper is what we now call neurodivergent, even prior to this terrible accident that happened to him. So I have one of my sons is neurodivergent and has, like helper, has perfect pitch and this thing called synesthesia, where the senses are mixed. And so I took some inspiration from Isaac, and he was one of my consultants in the book. And then also my neighborhood is just so rich with lore. This was the place where there was a tremendous immigration of Sicilian immigrants in the early 1900s. And Al Capone was married in this neighborhood. It's really it was a very organized crime kind of neighborhood. When we moved here in the early 90s, we were told it was the safest neighborhood in New York City because it was run by, because mafia people lived here. It's different now, but at the time I'm writing about, it was still much more in the grip of that culture. And Sicilians were denigrated by other Italians. They were considered, the Black people of Italy. And so when they came here, they had a lot of determination to set things right and to have power and so forth. And so I wanted to depict that because I feel like it's, there have been other neighborhoods written about in Brooklyn, and Carroll Gardens, I think, hasn't been celebrated enough as a really interesting place. Although I did see a walking tour there recently, around where I live recently, tourists being shown various places in the neighborhood. So I feel like it was kind of timely, to write about it. And it's also, I didn't want to mix it up with cell phones and what happened during 9/11. So I wanted to position it before 9/11 happened and before cell phones were all over the place. So it's a particular piece of timing in the story. And
Yeah.
that's it.
I think that last element is so interesting to hear about because more and more as technology maybe makes life easier, but lots of media more difficult. It's becoming this popular, not popular, but I'm seeing more and more authors are wanting to be very particular about the setting they pick. So I'm really interested to hear about that from you, Sally.
Mhm.
We do now have a couple of questions for Steve. First, can you talk about how Philadelphia influences your work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I when I was studying writing, um, I could see that place, just as Sally talked about, place becomes another character in the story, not separate from the personalities. Philadelphia is a very unique place, both in terms of architecture, sports, and it does influence both the characters and the way people think about themselves. And so for me, Philadelphia, through almost 9 books, has proven to be a very, very important character that people adapt to, whether it's something good or whether it's something bad. And and of course, part of the pleasure of researching a book is taking with new eyes, looking at your neighborhood, not just the people, but the architecture, and trying to think about how that does influence people and how it can be an interesting place for things to happen. So Philadelphia has become critical, and I was always encouraged to develop that aspect of things. And so Sally has that same thing about her neighborhood. I mean, these people spring from her neighborhood. They are both nurtured by it and limited by it. Philadelphia is a place where people love their sports and they love their heroes, and they boo Santa, who made the mistake of appearing at halftime of a dumpster fire of a football game in the 1990s, and they threw batteries at him and baseballs, and Philadelphia became known as the place that boos Santa. So, but it was justified under the Philly circumstances. So,
Well, yeah, and especially coming back to that kind of place-based setting, I think that is so intriguing to explore. It can really, just like Sally was saying, I mean, with the place setting, but also the time setting, but the place can be so important too, right? And Steve, while we're with you, another question real quick. Why choose that title, Killer Personality?
well, I wanted there to be no doubt. I think titles are really important, and I've used the word killer in every one of my books and say, well, what's the defining thing? One is personality, one is urge, killer looks, killer couple, and furthermore, in finding my voice, I wrote all my books are written in the first person, not my first person, but whoever is speaking. And so along those same lines, my cover is an eye, a human eye, which Atmosphere Press really helped me with. And it's the eye of the killer seeing out. So we see a lot of things from the point of view of the killer, so that I did it not as a point of view device so much as I did it as a way to get into the skin of whoever was speaking. And I found that to be much better than being an omniscient narrator or a third person narrator. And, it's like in a discussion, someone say, well, look at it from my point of view. Well, this is the killer's point of view, and so my books are killer books, serial killer books. This is what they are. This is what they announce. And I suppose to some extent, given my background also in marketing, I guess I'm trying to establish a brand, but really communicate, what they're about. I mean, and aside from that, they do make wonderful baby gifts. I'm just saying, so don't let the title discourage you.
Well, since you mentioned the cover, that actually leads really well into the next question. So I want to ask also the other two authors, what inspired your covers? Todd, what about you? What inspired your cover?
Yeah, so on my cover is the hurricane surfing ship. You can see the cockpit and the wings and the hydrofoil that goes down into the ocean. Uh, so obviously, inspired by the actual act of hurricane surfing that happens in the book. But it was an interesting journey to get there because in my head, when I first started writing the book, had a very different idea of what these hurricane surfing ships would look like. And then I had the good fortune to consult with a friend who designs high performance boats. And he was like, no, 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 that's not how they would work at all. So we totally scrapped that and um, redesigned this, did some fun little sketches imagining what it could be like. And then it was really a joy working with Atmosphere to turn that into what I think is a very eponymous, like, this is a thriller cover. So.
I love how much of a kind of scientific or physical conversation, physical as in like the laws of physics, that was. It's so interesting how that, and it's so important also because there are people out there who will comment on that otherwise, besides yourself just knowing that it's accurate, right? So I think that's such a fascinating element to the background of the cover design. Sally, what about you? What was the inspiration for your cover?
Well, I designed this cover actually. I had a vision of it. And I mean, the street signs are the way the street signs look in Carroll Gardens. And that witch is one of two witches I found on the sidewalk after a Halloween a couple of years ago in Brooklyn Heights. She and her sister who looks almost exactly like her, were lying on the sidewalk. I said, how can anybody abandon these glamorous witches? They have sequin dresses and so forth. Anyway, I brought them home and they live in my living room now. So I wanted to really evoke Carroll Gardens, and the ginkgo trees are very dominant in this neighborhood, and they're a very ancient tree, and they look beautiful when autumn comes, and they're bright yellow like little fans. And the art department at Atmosphere was incredibly helpful, Ronaldo, in putting together my vision of it. And so I'm very grateful to that department for helping me get this out. And it really looks just the way it looked in my head. So, I mean, it's not a thriller. And so for this book, I wanted it to be somewhat mysterious and also Halloween themed, right? She's witchy, right? So that's my story on my cover.
I love it. I always hear about the amazing finds you can get in New York. So I'm very delighted to hear about the story of the witches. And we're almost at our hour here, so I do want to make sure to get to one more question. And I actually really love this question, so I want to pose it to all three authors. Question is, what is something new you learned about yourself while writing this story? Steve, do you want to start us off on this one?
I'm sorry, did you ask me or
Yes, sorry, if you want to start us off on this one.
Yeah. What did I learn about myself? Well, I have scary thoughts in my head, but I think the thing that I learned about myself and about the writing that I take a lot of pleasure in, and I'm sure that Sally and Todd feel the same way, is that you don't have to know where your story is going. You just have to have the characters, and you have to have a starting point and maybe a city. And I always start with my villain. If I have a good villain, I think that the story will, if not write itself, it'll lead me to the story. And so I think that it's almost like, for me, it was just allowing it to happen. And I'm not particularly a patient person. Fortunately, my wife is on mute there, but I think that letting the story tell me where it wanted to go was very, very important. And it's something I learned about not rushing it or forcing it. I had something in mind, and you just can't, the characters will almost literally say to you, I am not going to say that. I don't want those words coming out of my mouth. And you keep forcing them and forcing them. Then you say, okay, what is it that you want to do here? And that is a thrilling experience in a way. It's like working with a living, you created this character and then you've lost control. They have their own thing they want to do. So that is an amazing experience for me.
Yeah, I always love hearing from authors about this experience of the characters really coming to life because it sounds outlandish on its head, but when you really experience that, it's truly such a real and satisfying and sometimes frustrating experience, especially when the characters take on a life of their own. But going to Sally, what is something new that you learned about yourself while writing this series?
Well,
Or excuse
I
me, this
feel
book.
I learned so much. And so it's a little daunting to try to say all the things I learned about Sicilian culture, for one thing. And also, I should mention, on my author website, which is sallyfrancis.com, there is a little video of me talking with one of the neighbors who is one of those descendants of the Sicilian immigration. And she was an inspiration to me in the writing of particularly one of the characters. But I learned about what it means to come out as a gay man in a different character. And I learned about I just learned so many different things. I learned something about police precinct functioning because one of the characters is a detective. And I learned how doing law enforcement work can be traumatizing to the people who are doing it. And I didn't expect to find that. And at one point, I really was having dialogue with the police detective character, because he would not say what I wanted him. I didn't go deep enough into him. And it was like, it was an impasse. And I had to go into his life more and his backstory more to understand how he could be, So I feel like every step of the way, this was learning for me. And also all the Post-its, 1,000 Post-its on a whiteboard, like what order do I put things in? How do I know? It was like putting together a quilt in a way. So I don't know if I've answered your question. It's an overwhelming question because I learned so much,
It really is. I mean, it's hard to describe, I think, and that's coming from me. I haven't even written a book, but even just from the process of writing smaller pieces, I have that kind of overwhelming experience. I can only imagine, the depth of what you learn as an author of a full-length book.
Yeah.
Todd, what about you? Closing us out, what's something you learned about yourself as you were writing this book?
Yeah, so I definitely learned a lot about the world. I did a ton of research for the book, but it's an interesting question of what did you learn about yourself? And so something that really struck out to me was I started writing a book as an activity to do alone. I was traveling a lot at the time and wanted something that, an activity, a creative hobby that I could do without depending on other people or tools. And by the time I finished the book, I realized just how important other people and community are to me. And I think that actually ends up getting reflected in the book as I write it, because the book very much starts off with just like, like individual person, I'm going to do this thing. And by the end, it becomes this, this ensemble cast of people who are all contributing together. And it really like would not work without this group of people. And yeah, it just made me really appreciate how important having that community is to me.
It's certainly a team effort to say the least. So I'm, overjoyed to hear that, that there's a team able to support all of you. And of course, I enjoy being a part of it myself. But for now, I just want to say to all of you, it was wonderful to hear all of your books in the voices of their very own creators, which I think is what's especially wonderful about live author readings. So to Todd, Steve, and Sally, thank you so much for being generous with your time, your books, your thoughts in the Q&A. Thank you also to everyone in the audience for being here with us to celebrate these authors together. Don't forget that you can order How to Surf a Hurricane, Killer Personality, and Carroll Gardens Story from the links in the chat. I'll put those in there one more time for everybody. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's reading. We look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's it. So have a great rest of your week and a happy Halloween if you celebrate. Bye.
Thank you.